When you run into financial trouble, something happens. You start getting collection notices, and you need to know how to respond to them and how to protect your credit when things go sideways. That's our topic today on the Debt Matters podcast. We're happy to help Canadians find solutions to their debt with licensed insolvency trustees from across Canada. I'm Wayne Kay, and we're going to talk about, the first thing you need to do when you get a collection notice. It is going to freak you out when you see it for the first time. What are some of the options consumers have to deal with their debt? Is there a time when someone should consult a lawyer? Is there anything consumers can do to reduce the impact on their credit report? And we're going to find out about some advice that if you're dealing with a collection company, what do you do exactly? My guest today, Marianne Marriott with Allen Marshall & Associates, licensed insolvency trustees from Nova Scotia. She's in the Halifax and Bridgewater offices. Welcome back, Marianne.
Well, thanks for having me back, Wayne.
You got it. Well, I think this is going to be a great topic for anybody who's getting to that point where all of a sudden they're starting to get notifications of that they owe money. Right?
Yes, absolutely.
And I mentioned in the intro that it's got to be awful to get. It's terrifying when you get it for the first time, I would assume.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it is one of the reasons that drives people to call, someone in our industry is those collection notices and collection calls.
Right. And they're hard. The stress when you get that and you read that or you get the phone call, because they're not exactly nice when they do it.
No.
Right? So it can be terrifying, and you're going to be awake all night stressing over this. And I'm glad that people make the phone call to the trustees to find out exactly what to do. So let's start off. All of a sudden, you get one of those collection notices. What's the first thing you should do?
Yeah. And so, the first thing is really don't panic, take a deep breath, and, just... You need to keep your calm because chances are the person on the other end of the line is going to, be in bully mode and try to intimidate you. So you need to be in a position where you're just not going to be intimidated. And I find that the best way to do that is just simply start asking for some information. Now, I will tell you, they don't always like that because you're switching the power position. But if an account's in collections, you deserve the information. So request documentation in writing, or by mail to verify the amount that you owe and question that. I mean, I've talked to people who owed $5,000 and all of a sudden they're getting a call saying 20. Well, if I owed 5 and now I owe 20, I would like to see a breakdown of that, please and thank you.
That's great. So you could actually ask them for that. I guess you could.
Yeah. And the other little piece too, I don't want to skip this because it's so important. Keep a log. Who did you talk to, when, and what did you say? Because that can be golden down the road if you need it.
That's good for everybody in any transaction you do. When you make a phone call to whoever, your cell phone provider, whatever it is, when you actually document and you can say, well, I called on this date at this time, it does give you a little more power. And they go, okay, because they're used to people being so unorganized and that are just, So that's great advice.
Yeah, and most of the time, the calls are recorded. So if you know the date and time, you have the right to request that recording if it's of you.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. I like where this is going. I'm feeling better already for anybody who's
You're feeling more powerful already if this ever happens.
Yeah, it's all about the power. What can people do, consumers, they have to deal with this debt. Let's talk about some of their options.
Yeah. So, the first thing is, and again, you don't just want to jump in and do what they ask of you. You want some time. This is why you want to request the information, sit down, look at it, think about it. And then what do? You have this account in collections. Well, you can pay them monthly. I mean, you can pay them out with a lump sum, but chances are it's in collections. You don't have that. You can pay it monthly, but you do want to make sure if you do that, the payment covers the interest and some more, because you don't want to just pay interest only forever. It's not getting you anywhere. And at some point, they're not going to be happy with that. And they're going to ramp up their collection efforts. Ideally, if you could borrow money in some way, shape, or form and pay it out, great. But remember, we just said you had a debt of $5,000, that's 20. You're not going to pay them 20. You're going to pay them a settlement. And so you start negotiating. So, if I could pay you a lump sum, how much would you take? They're going to come in high. You would see what you can do. You would offer that. So it'll go back and forth. And, more often than not, what happens is when you don't pay them initially, eventually you'll get a notice saying they will accept this amount. And that also isn't written in stone. So if they're offering to accept a settlement, chances are you can probably offer less. But I will tell you that I talk to a lot of people about this, and more times than not, there's no way they have access to the funds to pay out a lump sum.
Right, exactly. If you did, you wouldn't be in the problem that you're in unless you get help from somebody. But I'm going to be asking them for full written documentation and a contract, am I not? Like if they say, okay, I'm going to get working on this $5,000, so I'm going to give you $250 a month for 2 years. We'll throw in a little bit of interest, right? You don't just do a verbal, do you?
Yeah, I mean, they would never put anything in a contract. However, I would recommend that you get something from them saying that, you're agreeing to this offer, but they can change their mind at any point. So that's not really worth a lot. And, but that's where the log also comes in, where if you have really good records of who you spoke to and when and what was said. But, at the end of the day, you could do that for a year and then someone else picks up the file and they start trying to collect the full amount and say that payment's not acceptable. It's not unheard of.
Really? So they're moving the target. I'm not happy with this at all. No wonder people are so angry.
You're feeling bad now. See, it's going to be a flip-flop conversation.
It really is, though. Can you imagine that happening? Somebody gets into these situations, and we know that so many Canadians are going through hard times right now. And sure, they're going to have some debt build up, and maybe they won't be able to make a payment. And then all of a sudden, someone calls, and then you're struggling to make that payment. And then all of a sudden, they go, we needed more back, and it's not, not enough. I would lose my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why, many times people will look at doing a proposal or bankruptcy to clear it, because at least then they know that that's going to be cleared and they're not left negotiating with someone on the other line who may or may not be reasonable.
If you're having trouble financially, contacting a lawyer might not be feasible, but should you contact a lawyer at some point or no?
Well, sometimes that does make sense. And I'm currently working with a file on this. And I can tell you, we've been going back and forth. I'm going to say at least 6 months, 8 months. It's been a long time. And the collection company was just, in my opinion, uncooperative. And so they had the individuals had offered a settlement of $4,000 on I think it was a $5,000 or $6,000 debt, I don't know, a year before, 2 years before. And then someone picked it up again and said, guess what? It's $20,000. So here we go, right? Big jump. And so they offered the same settlement and it was rejected. And they requested documentation and were never given it. And then they were just told it was turned over to the lawyer, and then the lawyer never got back to them. So I did say, go talk to a lawyer, and the lawyer sent a request and did get some information. So it does tend to speed that up sometime. But I can tell you this is still ongoing, and they're still not getting an answer back, and they've not heard anything. And the debt, I assume, is continuing to accrue interest. So sometimes a lawyer letter will get them moving, but not always.
Mm-hmm. Okay, this is much deeper than I actually thought when we were talking about doing a show about collection notices and protecting yourself. This is very interesting. So when they make that first phone call, it's not like I have to get this done in the next week, even if they're pressuring me.
No. And in fact, if you're going to negotiate with a collection company, I typically do, offer the suggestion that you want to drag it out to some degree, because they'll be more willing to take less money if they've exhausted all efforts to get more. So waiting it out, getting back to them, offering a settlement later, sometimes those tactics do work and you get it settled at a much lower rate, but you put up with them reporting on your credit report while you're doing that.
Let's look into the, hypothetical. So if somebody owes money like this, let's use your clients as an example. They're owed the $4,000 or $5,000, $6,000, and all of a sudden they start getting these collection calls. Is that just for that debt typically, or is it for a bunch of debts that they have accrued?
No, it's typically one, because the one debt will be sold off to a collection company. The only time it would be a lot is, let's say it's a bank and you have a loan line of credit and credit card and they get lumped together. But more often than not, those are going to a legal firm, not a collection company.
And is it worth it at that point to go into a consumer proposal or no?
It could be. I mean, it depends on the circumstances. In this particular case, the person does have some money, they have some equity in their home. And so proposal or bankruptcy just doesn't make sense. They're really just trying to settle the debt at some reasonable amount and not, quadruple what it was to begin with.
Right. Okay. Now, the thing a lot of people worry about is their credit rating. I mean, we're told to protect that credit rating and do everything we can to build that credit rating up. So is there anything consumers could do to reduce the impact on their credit report when something like this happens?
Yeah, and not really, other than dealing with it as quickly as possible. So a lot of people think that because there's a statute of limitations on collecting debt through the legal process. And so a lot of people think, oh, once it's 10 years, it will just fall off and I won't have to deal with it, which isn't true. It just means they can't take you to court, but it can still be with the collection company and still destroy your credit. So, on one hand, I said, wait it out, take some extra time so you get a better deal. The problem with that is they're still reporting, but that's not the end of the world if you have a plan at the end. And so really dealing with it, as soon as you can to get them so they stop reporting, so it stops pulling your credit score down, is really, the better advice from a protecting your credit score point of view.
Mm-hmm. Okay. It's still important to be thinking about it though, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Don't put your head in the sand and ignore it. It will never go away and you will destroy your credit and that will haunt you for a very long time.
And I was thinking if this takes, you mentioned 10 years, somebody could wait 10 years and then that's where they'll say, okay, well, we've given up. But that's not the case. And I would think the stress of having something like this over you for 10 years would be a lot.
Yeah, and they bounce it around from collection company to collection company. So the thing is that if it goes stale with one, they can sell it off to another collection company. They get some money, and then that one starts calling you fresh. And that's important to know as well.
Okay. Any advice you offer someone dealing with collection companies? Anything else we need to know?
Yeah, just know your rights. It's really easy to look them up. Just type in collection company consumer rights, and they're all there. And in many blogs and many, the act is there as well, but like human language that we can understand. And so know your rights. Don't be intimidated. So just because they're using tactics, like just know that you have, a right to, once you look at the rights, that you have certain rights. That's going to be important so that you're not as intimidated. And if you just can't handle it, and quite frankly, some people just can't handle it, it's too stressful, then engage the services of a third party. And that might be a lawyer or it might be a licensed insolvency trustee, so that they can step in between you and the collection company and help you sort it out.
I know in the past when we've talked and somebody's getting, these collection notices and having people phone them, and all of a sudden they contact the trustee and you decide, okay, we're going to make some changes here. And then the phone calls stop. Like you stop them almost immediately is that with a consumer proposal or bankruptcy?
Yes, absolutely. The
Okay.
minute you file a proposal or bankruptcy, a stay of proceedings goes into place, and you can think of that like a legal wall between you and your creditors. So they're no longer able to accept payment. So there's no reason for them to call you looking for it.
Okay. Is there anything that stops them from calling and hounding you to make a faster decision?
And only a bankruptcy or proposal. Without that, there's nothing that's going to stop them from calling you.
Except listening to this and listening to Mary Ann's advice on how to exactly deal with them. Ask questions. You want to see exactly what they're talking about. That's totally fine. And ask for any kind of conditions or what they're really proposing. You have to completely understand this before you can say yes to it.
Absolutely.
All right. Final words of advice.
Be strong, don't be intimidated, and be informed.
Okay, terrific. Mary Ann, always a pleasure. Thanks very much for all the information.
You're welcome. Thank you, Wayne.
Well, once again, my guest today, Mary Ann Marriott. You can learn more or schedule a free consultation with Alan Marshall and Associates, licensed insolvency trustees, through their website at wecanhelp.ca. The important thing to know there is your first consultation is absolutely free, okay? wecanhelp.ca. And that is it for today's Debt Matters podcast. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcast from. And of course, for more information, you can always check out debtmatters.ca. If you know somebody who needs this information in their life now, please share it with them. Thanks for listening.